From the Fidelity Bank Foundation studio, PBS Kansas presents One-on-One with Victor Hogstrom.
Tonight, we sit down with a man whose journey has been anything but ordinary. From a childhood in small-town Pennsylvania to a career shaping ideas about economic freedom, George Pearson's life has been one of resilience, determination, and unexpected opportunities. A former Koch Industries executive, real estate investor, and lifelong advocate for liberty, George's path has been shaped by history, business, and personal discovery. Join us now as we dive into the stories, lessons, and experiences that have defined his remarkable journey, one-on-one. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Victor Hogstrom. I'm pleased to welcome policy advocate and businessman George Pearson to the program. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Now, George, you moved here several years ago from Pennsylvania.
Yes.
To Wichita.
Yes.
Tell us where in Pennsylvania and how did that happen?
I grew up in western Pennsylvania, and I went to college in western Pennsylvania. I majored in economics, and I had an economics teacher I was very fond of. And I came to deciding that I wanted to be involved with spreading what I had learned as a student. And so after I graduated, a few months after I graduated, I came back and I stopped and I talked to him. And we had a conversation for about a half an hour. And he said, "Do you want to go to Wichita, Kansas? I have an aunt that lives out here. I'd never been here. And nothing else to do. I hadn't gotten a job since I got out of college. So I was happy to go, and 3 weeks later, I'm in Wichita. And the reason he was here was because he was doing a seminar for the YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And so the first thing we did was meet the committee, the program committee. So the first 4 people I met in Wichita were Charles Koch, Bob Love, Willard Garvey, and John Fraser. And that's how I ended up in Wichita.
So what was it that you learned during your college years that you so desire to spread?
Well, it was economics and it was common sense. And I had a great teacher. And I decided that I liked those ideas and I'd like to spread them.
We'll talk about those ideas later on, but share with us a bit about your childhood growing up in rural Pennsylvania.
Okay. We lived outside of a small city, Beaver Falls, but we went to township schools. So these schools in the township, my father was on the school board, so he took an interest, so I had to really pay attention. And he continued on that school board for 30 years, but by then it had completely changed because townships were all brought together, township schools were all brought together in a big school district. So I was there to witness the beginning of that change. He watched the whole thing.
So your father then was a big influence in your life, one of the biggest.
Yes.
What were the biggest lessons you learned from him?
Well, he wanted us to be responsible. And with that, it meant he wanted us to be responsible for ourselves. So that went all the way to paying for our college education and having jobs and doing things that we could do to save, to have enough to pay a portion what college cost.
You have a brother,
I do.
but you and your brother had very different interests.
Yes.
How did that shape your relationship?
Well, we weren't as close as we'd be if we had similar interests. He was interested in everything mechanical, and I was interested in everything sports. So his headboard at the bed was nothing but mechanical books. My headboard was nothing but Sports Illustrated.
What role did your mother play in shaping your character, George?
My mother was stoic, and so she wanted to be sure that you paid attention to things that needed to be done, and you didn't get out of line, and you behaved yourself, good behavior.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to your college days. During those days, there were two things that set the course for your life today.
Yes.
What are they?
Well, this happened as an epiphany for me. I didn't expect it. My economics professor arranged for me to go with a couple other students to Foundation for Economic Education, which had an Austrian economics, which was what I'd studied in college. And we went there and I met people, there were business people there that wanted to help the organization, so they'd come by and we'd talk to them. And when I left, as I was leaving, I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to become independently wealthy, and I want to see the world. That was part of the epiphany too. So become independently wealthy so I could promote what I believed, and by lining up with Koch right after I was out of college, I didn't have to be independently wealthy to work in the field, the area that I wanted to do and do the things I wanted to do. Later on, after I left Koch, that changed, but for 20 years at Koch.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Austrian economics.
Yes.
For those who don't know what that is, would you briefly give us?
It began in Austria, and it moved over to this country when some of the people during the war came to American universities, New York University, Chicago University. And it's not that much different from Friedman. Mm-hmm. They're Austrians and Chicago economists mixed together very well.
You had to find, despite the assistance from your father and the role model that he was in your life, you had to find creative ways to fund your education. How did you do it, and what did you do? What did you learn from that experience?
This happened, I'm sitting in class at the end of first semester of my second year, and I realized I'm not going to have enough for the next semester. So I had to figure out, and what I did was I found a job where we sold hope chest items to single working girls. And $250 for a set of lifetime cookware. And the commission I'd get from that would be $50. So I could get by on that. Well, one of my classmates and fraternity brothers was a year behind me, and the same thing happened to him when he got to his sophomore year. So he said he'd like to sell pots and pans, and he did, and he was good. And I got a $25 override on every one he sold. So that made it nice for me.
So you were sitting pretty.
Yeah. But then he came back and he said, you know, I found a place where we can buy these for $250. The $250 set for $50. And that's $200 off of $250 sets, even better than $50, $75. Mm-hmm. So we did. We made an agreement with the company and we started the business, and we continued it the rest of the time. I was in school and he did the rest of the time he was in school. So that got us through, but it was consistent with the way I'd been brought up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was comfortable and it was good. I tried to do the same thing with our kids, but you know, we did with one of them. We told him, he said, "Ron, you can't believe how good you'll feel if you earned your way through college." I knew how good it felt. And then he did. We gave him a little help at the beginning.
So let's come back now to your time at Koch Company. What was your role in administering the Fred C. Koch Foundation?
When I was in Kansas and I got activated, I was in the service. When I got out of the service, up until then at Koch, I'd just been kind of an errand boy. And so when I got out, the thing that I needed to do was to, well, I'm thinking about being independently wealthy, all right, now. Now I don't have to be independently wealthy. Now there's some money there. And the way that money got there is what I think is the interesting part of the story. Fred Koch died while I was in the service, before I got out. And what he did was he made an arrangement, there was an arrangement where each of the 4 boys would own a quarter of the asset. Any money from that asset would then go to charity. So all of that had to go to charity for 10 years, and if it did, then the asset passed hands without any tax.
So you became public affairs.
So I managed those 4 foundations for 10 years, 15 years.
But you became director of public affairs also.
Well, the boys got to fighting with each other. And at that time, we were this 1980, they were 16 billion, Koch was a $16 billion a year company. But they had no retail product, they had no publicly held stock, they had no reason to be in front of anyone. And so it just under the radar. Well, once the fight started, it was no longer under the radar. They went public, especially the 2 that were trying to take control. And we didn't have any public relations, community relations, government relations. We didn't have any of that. So we needed to have a public affairs department. And gradually I moved into that as we grew it.
So how did the family litigation at Koch Industries change the focus of your work?
Well, it took me out of the part of the work that I really liked.
As the foundation side?
Yes. But in the 15 years I was there, we started a number of different nonprofit organizations, mostly think tanks. And I could then go to them, and I knew the business, so I could help participate with others in doing this. But then I still I wasn't independently wealthy. So I had to find a business where I could be.
Okay, and did you finally become independently wealthy? You've mentioned that several times now.
Well, that was the goal.
Yeah.
I'm not as independently.
Did you achieve that goal?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Very good. George, looking back, what impact do you think you had during your time at Koch Industries?
What impact did I have? All the time I was doing the Koch work, as I said, we didn't do much. We flew under the radar. But we got more involved over that 10, 15-year period with local activities like the River Fest and with things like that. Mm-hmm. So that was always my assignment to do that. I was on maybe a dozen boards, everything from the Chamber of Commerce to Big Brothers. And so that was really nice to be engaged in the community at that level.
So you became a highly recognizable name in the community.
Yes.
Wow. So we play a game, as you probably know, on this program. This one's for you. It's called Fill in the Blank. All right? So you will fill in the blank, and the first one is, the best piece of advice I ever received was?
Be honest and be responsible. I received that over and over again.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
The next one is, if I could have dinner with any historical figure, it would be?
They'd have to be living.
Yes. No, not necessarily. If you could have.
Yeah. A fellow named Baldy Harper, and he founded the Institute for Humane Studies, and he was the first one I worked closely with when I was at Koch. He was a remarkable man.
The next one, if I could have, no, I'm sorry. The next one is, the most valuable lesson I learned in business is?
You've got to be dedicated to the job.
One word my friends would use to describe me is?
Committed.
Committed. Okay. Well, that's a good one too. If I had to sum up my philosophy of leadership in one sentence, it would be?
Respect for others.
The most unexpected challenge I ever faced was?
Well, the litigation between the brothers. It went on for years.
If I could erase one moment from my career, it would be?
I'm not sure.
So you,
I don't have anything I regret.
right. That's very good. The best part of working at Koch Industries was, and the toughest part was?
The best part was the people I worked with, and the toughest part was reaching a level of achievement that the people I worked for were satisfied.
And the final one, my favorite American symbol is?
You would ask that. Just yesterday we got a flag and hung it up over the door.
So it's the flag.
Yes.
Very good. So, George, let's continue with the regular questions. How did you first become connected with the economic freedom movement?
Through the seminar that I went to when I was a senior in college at the Foundation for Economic Education, and they're still at it and growing.
And what did you learn from that? Something must have hit you.
I learned the distinctions between the other kinds of economics and Austrian economics.
Okay. You became involved in public policy by also helping to establish a think tank.
More than one.
More than one. What was the intent, and what were the accomplishments?
Well, the first one was the Institute for Humane Studies. And this man found freedom in every discipline. Unfortunately, he died a year after I went there, was working there. And we couldn't carry on with that work. So what I knew was Austrian economics. What Charles was interested in was Austrian economics. And we had one of the top economists that we'd been supporting. So we got together and we figured out a map, a way to revive Austrian economics in this country. And it's been revived.
What does that Austrian economic lead to?
I hope leads to good decisions. Economics is about choices. It's about what your personal wants are. And so I think getting the right perspective on your economic activity is beneficial.
Is it about economic freedom?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
How do you then define economic freedom, and how is it accomplished?
Well, when people are free to do things that are not a problem, I won't say illegal, because we can make things illegal without them really being offensive in a way of disrespect for property.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one thing.
How is it accomplished?
Through education. So they're now probably, well, my own college, Grove City College, is now ramping up its Austrian economics program so that they'll have 3 or 4 Austrian economists in the faculty teaching economics.
Are you saying it's only Austrian economics that will lead to economic freedom?
No, no. I think if that's the goal, there are different paths to get there. And so you have to match up with a path that you think's the one that would do the most good.
So after leaving Koch Industries, you shifted your focus to something totally different.
No, I stayed working with those organizations that we'd helped build while I was at Koch. So I'd work for them independently, 3 or 4 different ones.
Right, but you shifted also to real estate.
Well, I had to.
What drew you to that?
An accident.
An accident?
Yeah.
I'd like to have that kind of accident. Tell me about it.
Well, it's a lot of work, I'll tell you that. There used to be in Wichita on 2nd Street a foundry, Western Iron and Foundry. And it was run by a friend of mine, Tom Wolke. He'd come here with Grady Foundries and decided he wanted to have his own foundry, and so he got this foundry. And after he'd had it for a few years, he decided he wanted to expand it. And it had a steel shop with it, so it was foundry and a steel shop. And he wanted to sell the steel shop so he'd have the room and the resources to expand the foundry. And I'm thinking, you know, there are tax advantages to having a business. And I think I can find some tax advantages. So I bought it from him. And the agreement required me to move it, to move out completely that unit, the activity, to move it completely out within a year. So I built a 5,000 square foot warehouse to move it into.
To move what into?
The steel operation.
The steel, okay.
And shortly after I did that, that market went down. Made the signs over the highways and the poles that held the signs, and they quit, federal government quit funding that, and so we've got no customer. But I had a warehouse, and I was able to rent the warehouse, and I was first of a number of warehouses that I built and rented. And that worked out well. That was an accident.
Good accident.
Well, good things happen. Good things happen, even if they're accidental.
Right. So what were the biggest challenges when you transitioned from the corporate life to the life of an entrepreneur?
Well, at the same time, we're starting to have grandkids. So instead of working 60 hours a week, I'm busy 80 hours a week. So that was part of the transition, but I was doing just exactly what I wanted to do.
You and your wife, Marilyn, have built a life together for over 50 years. What's been the secret to a strong marriage relationship?
For anyone, it's commitment. You're committed to do the things to make it work out as best it can.
So, George, looking back at your journey from Pennsylvania to Wichita, from business to family, what are your most proud moments?
One of them is KPI, Kansas Policy Institute. I was a co-founder of Cato, and what KPI was, what I wanted it to be, was a state-level Cato, and dealing with entirely different laws and regulations, everything. And so we did that. Took 25 years, but I think we're now where we can make some helpful suggestions on what laws are being passed.
And you're retired or semi-retired?
No, because, well, the other organization that I spent 20 years trying to help build it was Atlas, and that's a think tank that helps other think tanks. We now have 500 think tanks we work with in 100 different countries. And that actually, just to keep up with it, keeps me, I got to figure out how to.
So you're not retired?
Well, I've left the boards. I no longer chair any boards. On an advisory committee on a couple boards. Yeah, I'm moving away from it.
You're moving away. All right. Economic policy advocate and champion of freedom, George Pearson. Thank you.
Thank you.
For joining me one-on-one. It's been a pleasure.
It has been.
And thank you for watching this edition of One-on-One. One-on-One at kpts.org is our email address if you have a question or comment. I'm Victor Hogstrom. Be well, and I'll see you again soon.